Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
Hello, everybody, and welcome into Big 10 Plus 4 as we're working up a sweat here this morning talking to everybody. I'm Dalton Shetler, that's Sam Sprunger, Tony Hollinsworth in the middle, and, of course, this is Big 10 Plus 4, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar, and blue blood. All right, fellas, a lot's happening in Big 10 football. Ohio State continues to flex its muscle. There's a couple other storylines in the East, including a top 10 matchup that we'll be talking about a little bit later in today. There's not too often that we're going to be having top 10 battles in Big 10 football this year. Like, this is one of maybe two or three times this is going to happen.
Right. It might happen, 3 times, depending on the outcomes of the games, to where it might happen 3 times.
Yeah, we've got one this weekend, maybe Ohio State versus Penn State, depending on what each team does down the road, but yeah.
Meaning Penn State.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, Ohio State, Michigan at the end, which just seems like it's destiny at this point that we're going to be seeing two really maybe top 5 teams at that point competing maybe for the Big Ten title right there. And we don't even need to go to Indianapolis to play. Whoever comes whoever puts their hand up out of the drowning that is the Big Ten West.
Easy.
Hey, everybody's within a game in the Big Ten West. Nebraska's still in it. Wisconsin's still in it. I mean, this is quite the race in the Big Ten West, but maybe leading the way and in the top 25 for the first time in 11 years, the Fighting Illini. Fellas, are we starting to roll with Champaign a little bit? Are we believers in the Illinois Illini?
No.
Still, really?
No. Here's the reason. We've talked about it at the beginning or before the season started that we could see Illinois be like 4 or not before after those first couple of games that Illinois could be 4-0 going into their murderers row, and now it's turning into more like a I don't know, but a parade almost. The teams they're playing, how they're performing, but I still think they're. I don't know. God, it's horrible because I'm sitting here thinking I absolutely know Illinois is not going to be there at the end of the season, and they're just going to hang around and they're going to be one of the teams. It's going to stands to reason they'll be the ones that take the Big Ten West from Purdue the one year that Purdue could take it.
That's kind of my thinking, Tony. You're still not buying in the Illini either.
Not really. I mean, they, at least so far, they haven't really played anybody of true worthy competition. So that's where it's like, I gotta pump the brakes a little bit right now. Kind of like Sam said, it's one of those first few weeks where all right, if they can get through this, 1 loss, no losses at all, think they'll be okay. And to me, I've always been a big proprietor, and we've talked about how the AP poll is more reactionary than it is an actual ranking of the teams. Even then, I look at the teams basically from about 13 to 25. Those are all interchangeable. Those are not really teams that we look at and we're like, oh, man, Illinois is ranked number 24 right now, man. Ugh, that's a tough number 2014. No, those are all pretty interchangeable. Like, if one goes down, one goes up. It doesn't really make that big of a difference. At least at the moment, it doesn't do much for the playoffs. So, I mean, looking at Illinois, awesome that they've won. Looking at it from a stats perspective, it was just and of course the score as well showed it. It was 6-9. It was such an ugly game.
Well, that has more to do with Iowa than it does Illinois, just to be fair. But go on.
Illinois was pretty bad too. I'm looking at Sitkowski threw for 74 yards. Illinois' bread and butter that game was rushing. They rushed for 200 yards as a team. They only threw for 116 yards total. And then compared to Iowa, who threw for 170 from Petrus and 52 rushing yards. So, I mean, it was an all-around really just ugly game.
And I suppose what I mean is Iowa just wants to play in this torture chamber. Like, that's what I mean why it's ugly, because Iowa every week is like, hey, we see you up above surface. Come down here. We want to just sling it around and just drag each other through the mud. Like, can we make you worse or you make us worse? Like, that's Iowa football this season.
I am so like watching that game. It was almost as bad as the Colts Broncos Thursday night game. It was that bad. Like, and it could have easily finished with the same score. I mean, like literally, it could have
2 field goals short of matching.
Yeah. So I mean, I can't buy into Illinois yet until they beat somebody of substance. If they win this week, I think then I would say, okay, I'll buy in that they are legit and ready to rock for the West.
3 interesting things off of that. One, if you're not already following Sickos Committee on Twitter, if you are somebody who sat there and enjoyed the beauty or the not beauty of Illinois, Iowa, Sickos Committee is for you. So give that a follow because you're going to see a lot of stuff like that on that Twitter account. But also, while we talk about Illinois, right now, the analytics, like if a computer is trying to pick the Big Ten West, it's picking Illinois at this moment, which is why I find it so interesting that Tony and Sam, both of you are so kind of defiantly at the moment not riding the wave that is the Illini. But let me take a look at the schedule real quick before we continue on. And we'll talk Illinois, Minnesota here in a little bit. We'll preview that in the second quarter. But whatever you make of that game, and again, we'll talk about it in a moment. After that, there's a bye week. And then the Illini head to Nebraska. Can Illinois win at Nebraska? Let's just run through these game by game.
Oh, yeah, I think so. I think they win against Nebraska.
Okay, Sam?
I think Nebraska's still up in the air. Like, they could surprise some teams. Illinois might be, though, but I would pick Illinois.
Okay, and then they host Michigan State. Can they win that one?
Yes.
Tony?
I think it's possible. I think it'll be a lot closer than what we expect, though.
Okay. After that, it's Purdue. What do we think?
Home or away?
Ooh, good question. Home.
It's in Champaign. I'll still take Purdue, but I think it's a lot closer.
Okay. At Michigan, we could chalk up the loss, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. And then they round out the season at Northwestern.
They'll win that.
Yeah.
So out of their last 5 games, we're seeing 4 are winnable. 3 they probably are favored in of those final 5. They're currently 5-1. We'll talk about Minnesota soon, but I mean, we're already chalking them up for about a 9-win season. That might just win the West. So I'm interested to talk about it more. Well, Sam keeps saying no, but and the beauty is Sam has a case because the Boilers helped stay alive in College Park, 31-29. Purdue gets the win over Maryland. This was one that I didn't get to see too much of, so I'm hoping you folks can enlighten me. I know there was a failed 2-point conversion towards the end from the Terps that kind of left our score at 31-29. But Purdue escapes with the victory and maybe still has the leg up in the West, if anybody does.
I think they do. I think, and this is not saying they can't lose in any of the other, but I think this was their final hard test, especially, obviously, their last East crossover of, I don't consider IU an East, even though that's always just a game at the end of the season. I don't consider it a crossover because it's the rivalry. But anyways,
right.
I think, they've still got Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, IU, and I can't remember
I'll look while you keep going.
Maybe Northwestern, but like that's the rest of they should win every one of those games. Should. So so right there, that's why I think that they are the ones that are going to win the West, and it's not going to be it's not going to be anybody else. That's just my thought.
The final 6 before Tony gets going: home Nebraska, at Wisconsin, home Iowa, at Illinois, home Northwestern, at Indiana. So
basically one test, basically the Illinois game in Champaign is kind of that final thing, keeping from Purdue from winning the West. Just saying, there's no.
I mean, that's a great point when you look at that schedule. I mean, you got 2 interim coaches you're going against the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
And then Iowa, which, oof. at Illinois. Yeah, this is lining up nice for the Boilermakers. Tony, what do you got?
Yeah, this is one. So we've always talked about how Maryland up and how the NFL sides of the ball and Purdue.
Is he cracking out on you too?
Yes.
Am I? Okay.
Yeah.
You're back for the moment. If you want to try, give it a round 2.
Yeah. Okay, round 2. Here we go. So we always talk about how Maryland and Maryland is basically this team that has these great NFL prospects on it at the current moment. Purdue went toe and toe with them pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing, and of course Sam knows this all too well, the only thing Purdue did not do well this past week was run the ball. They had 34 rushing attempts. They ran for a grand total of 13 yards against.
And I don't get it either, because against Minnesota they ran it 26 times for what, like 160 yards. So I mean, like it's, and I would consider I would consider Minnesota's defense better than Maryland's.
Yeah. And keep in mind too, Purdue was able to win with having 3 turnovers. They lost 2 fumbles. They threw an interception.
Injured quarterback too.
Yeah. And I mean, Aiden O'Connell and, Tulia Tungavailoa, their numbers were eerily similar. O'Connell threw for 360 yards and 2 tutties with an interception. Tungavailoa threw for 315, 3 touchdowns and interception. So, I mean, this was probably a lot better game than what people expected. I know for us being in the Big Ten, we expected it to be pretty good. But this is one, I think Purdue continues to roll. The only game out of that I might say is a trap game would be Iowa, and that's only because Iowa decided to transfer up to Purdue, so who knows those players better than the Iowa Hawkeyes. That might be a little bit of a trap game, a little bit, but we'll see.
I do believe the over-under was 59.5, and if my math is correct, it was 60 total points for the game.
Yes.
Just throwing that out there.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I do love the thought of Purdue, Iowa, though. That's going to be must watch. Like, you got a Purdue offense that's soaring high, and Iowa's just going to clip the wings and just sit there and do nothing with that. I mean, that's
that offense, while maybe not as potent last year as it was this year, went into Iowa City and beat that defense up.
Mm-hmm.
So I think at least, well, let's say it this way. They beat them up a lot more than the Iowa offense did the Purdue defense. So
correct.
And to me, not much has changed. So I don't know. I don't say no, it can't be, but I just don't see it happening that way like it did.
Well, that's the beauty, though. You score 7 or 10 points if you're Purdue, and you're probably winning that game. I think I was averaging 6 points, and like we just saw with Illinois just had to get to 9, and it was like, too much. We're tapped out. Like, there's a certain threshold you have to get by, but I was going to fight you tooth and nail to get to those 6 points. Like, it's going to be something.
I actually have Iowa in my headlines talking about the offense. So it's not a good offense. And Purdue's defense isn't horrid, so I can't see Iowa scoring much more than 7 to 10 points against them. And I know that's not who they're playing this week, but my point is I don't know that I can buy in on it being that much of a trap game. It could be, but I don't see it being one.
I'm not sure that it really matters which defense you throw out there. Is the other thing. Like we can focus on Purdue's defense, but I don't think it really matters.
Sure.
Real quick before we get to break, let's break down one more. Michigan State, Ohio State. This one in East Lansing. Ohio State did what was expected. They win 49-20 here. Michigan State continues to struggle in numerous areas. The secondary continues to have flaws as young people kind of get carouseled in and out there in the defensive backfield. Running the ball continues to be a big issue. Just 7 rushing yards for Michigan State in this one. Tony, let's start with you. What stood out to you about this game?
Honestly, the thing that probably stood out to me the most is, we've talked about how the Ohio State receivers haven't been healthy. They still don't have Njigba White back. I can't remember the other one's name off the top of my head.
Smith and Njigba, you mean?
Yeah, Smith and Jigba. Isn't there another one? I know he's the big one. I know he's their number one.
Well, they've been in and out with their running backs too. So this week, Mine Williams was gone.
Yeah. But, we still have Emeka. I'm going to butcher his last name, so I'm not even going to try.
Here, I'll jump in. Emeka Egbuka.
Okay. I'm going to get that right by the end of the season, and then, of course, it's not going to matter anymore. He had a big game, but so did another big team. Marvin Harrison Jr. has really stepped up. He wasn't as big of a factor for the Buckeyes last year, but this year, with the rotation, wide receivers being in and out, he's made a big statement and a big case for himself, kind of following in Dad's footsteps a little bit as far as a great. He had 7 receptions, 131 yards, and 3 touchdowns.
Mm-hmm.
So, this is one of those now that Ohio State's having to kind of get used to, okay, we're not going to always have our number one guys. They're getting better about, all right, you guys got to step up. And all of these players so far have stepped up and shown, okay, we're going to go out there and we're going to compete. And they're doing it at a great level. So, Ohio State at the moment is continuing to churn out great wide receivers.
This is the number one team in the country to me. Yeah. Think about this. They're the number one scoring offense in the country, and they're not even 100% yet. So they're not running at full capacity. Their defense is markedly different. They're better than it was last year. They're only allowing 15.7 points a game. And looking at these scores, granted, there hasn't been a huge game other than the Notre Dame game when it happened. And even now, Notre Dame's a lot better than what they were performing. They beat BYU. Yeah, they lost to Marshall at home afterwards. So what? They're better than what everybody was saying they are after Marshall, but they're not on Ohio State's level. But my point on this is Ohio State has done what they were supposed to do with it. There hasn't been that scare game yet, like there has been for Georgia and like there has been for Alabama twice.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, I think they're being undersold on where they're at in the rankings to me, because they're not at full force yet offensively. Their defense is markedly better, and they're just whipping their opponents.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Tony.
Real quick. I know I couldn't.
The gentleman in the center.
There's 2 teams this year in all of college football that every game that they've played and they've won has been by double digits. And ironically, both teams' initials are O, S, and U.
Would that be Oklahoma State and Ohio State?
Ohio State and Oklahoma State are the only 2 teams so far this year that have won all their games by double digits or more.
More than double digits. Good Lord, there's a game that somebody's.
Hey, it was close with Toledo. They almost pulled it out against Toledo, but still, that gives you an idea right there of where Ohio State sits. Like you said, Georgia's had a couple. Georgia had a scare. Alabama's had multiple scares.
Yeah, well, Georgia technically has had a couple if you consider Kent State along with Missouri.
Yeah, and I think honestly, and Dalton, you can, or Sam, either one, you guys can disagree with me. I kind of have to agree with Joel Klatt right now. The only clear front runner for Heisman favorite right now is CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Like Bryce Young, again, Bama has struggled a couple times. This is not a Bama team that I
didn't play last week, but that's fine.
Yeah, But
I agree.
Yeah, to me, CJ Stroud is rolling with whatever he's got, and it's not even close.
He's hit the halfway point of the season. He has 24 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions. 24 to 3.
8-1.
8 to 1
touchdowns to every interception.
And get this too. I saw ESPN Stats and Info tweet this out, which really just kind of like hurt my heart after seeing the game. But ESPN Stats and Info really threw some salt in it when they said CJ Stroud in the last 2 games against Michigan State has 12 touchdown passes, 8 incompletions.
Say that again.
12 touchdown passes, 8 incompletions. Yeah, more touchdowns thrown than incomplete passes. Yeah, this dude is the runaway Heisman at this point. Like, unless something unforeseeable.
But you know what? Kenny Walker III ran for 5 touchdowns against Michigan and didn't get invited. So,
oh my God. Well, you know what? The brand's not an issue there. That's what the issue was last year, and I will fight that tooth and nail. You voters, you really messed up here. I'm sure you don't even care, but you messed up here.
Played for Ohio State, he would have been in New York.
100%. The trophy would have went to him.
Yeah, that's true. You're probably 100% right.
Oh, don't.
Sorry to pour the salt back in the wound. And
there was 7 rushing yards this weekend. This was an offense with Kenny Walker. Walker ran for 1,700 yards. Like I continue. We knew it at the time. I don't think anybody fully understood the significance that Walker had, the full value, the full length of it, because we're seeing it on display now. It was atrocious. It's atrocious. But yeah, I could go on. We could do the rest of the show on how Ken Walker got just absolutely hosed on the Heisman.
We can put that behind the paywall.
Yeah, right.
I don't know how big of wrestling fans you two gentlemen are, but it reminds me of the Montreal screw job. Brett got screwed. Kenny Walker got screwed.
Kenny Walker screw job. Okay. Well, so hey, it fits.
It does. It does.
Real quick before we go to the second quarter, flipping over because we focused a lot there on Ohio State. For Michigan State, confidence level from both you two in the Spartans. They have Wisconsin at home, then a bye week, then at Michigan before getting into the November stretch. Where are you two at with Michigan State?
I grossly overestimated what they would be doing. I still don't think that they're a horrible team. They are just getting, unfortunately, no production from their strong suit on defense, which is then in turn making them look like even worse, or even way worse than what they are. So I mean, it's I don't know that they're gonna. Golly, what's their record right now? Are they?
They're 2-4 currently.
2-4. Okay, that's what I thought.
0-3 in the big team.
I would be shocked if they finish at or above 500 this year. And it's not saying they couldn't. I just don't know that I don't anticipate it, because they're just not looking like they have.
Well, before Tony jumps in, I mean, keep in mind you have an at Michigan and an at Penn State still for the Spartans on their schedule. And then you have in between that, you have a home Wisconsin, a home Indiana, a home Rutgers, and an at Illinois.
And Illinois is not a pushover.
Mm-mm. And honestly, at this point, Rutgers would be quite the game. Like maybe even Indiana too. Indiana beat Illinois. I mean, it's something. So, Tony, excuse me. Wow, that really ate me up.
Gracious.
Tony, give you a shot here before we close out the first.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Sam. I think they're going to finish right at about 500, maybe a little bit below. Out of those games that you mentioned, the two I think for sure are losses, unfortunately, are going to be Michigan and Penn State, probably Illinois. So I could easily see them finishing, 4-3, 3-4, down the stretch. So like right at about 500, maybe a little bit less. It is sad. The defense is still an issue, especially the secondary is still bad. And then the offense, we saw it. Kenneth Walker carried this offense, and they're not clicking. I don't know what it is. I don't know why. Peyton Thorne is not as well as he was. And yeah, it's a sad day. It's a sad day for Michigan State, especially when we were, enamored with K9. Now we're got to come back down to reality for a little bit.
Well, let's think about how Michigan State might have been last year had they not had K9. Like, we wouldn't be talking about such a successful season had they not had him on their team. I mean,
correct.
And Wake Forest threw him away.
Yeah, it's true. It's very true. And the only thing I'll say to close that part out is you mentioned at Michigan and how right now that it just doesn't look like there's any shot. We thought the same in 2020 when MSU was 23.5 point underdogs. You're correct. If you're looking at a stat sheet right now, there doesn't seem to be too much logic that would point you in any direction that has maybe Michigan State upsetting Michigan, but we've seen some crazy things happen in this rivalry before. Both teams will be off a bye when that happens on October 29th. But let's go ahead and close out the first quarter, get to the second. All right, here we want to preview a little bit of Big Ten football that we have coming up here this weekend. And let's start with the big one. Top 10 matchup, Michigan and Penn State.
From the big house.
That's right, in Ann Arbor. This is one of the few tests that Michigan will see all season until they get to that final game with Ohio State. Penn State has a chance to really validate themselves with a good game here, because Penn State's obviously won some games. They beat Purdue in a game that maybe they shouldn't have. They beat Auburn on the road, so they're a little bit road battle tested. They won one against Northwestern most recently, but that was 2 weeks ago, and it was 17-7. So I'm having a hard time kind of discerning what Penn State is. What do you both make of this?
Go ahead, Tony.
Okay. I think this will be a lot closer than what we think. You know, the fact that Penn State just came off of a game 2 weeks ago against Northwestern, scored 17 points, not necessarily against a bad Northwestern team, but it's one of those, when you do what you did to Auburn, when you've been able to do what you've been able to do, I expect a little bit better out of Penn State from that. And on the other half, I'm a little bit worried about Michigan. And I say that because I don't know if you gents watched the Michigan versus Indiana game. It was 10-10 for a long time. And then Michigan kind of finally broke out a little bit. And I mean, the final score was 31-10. So, I mean, it looked worse than what it is. But to me, this is going to make me kind of wonder about Michigan, because this will be Michigan's first true big test. Are they going to reaffirm that they are the other team to beat in the Big Ten as it stands? And, you know, are they going to make this a statement game of, okay, you know, we've had close ones with Maryland, we've had close ones with IU, you know, two teams that IU is supposed to be, you know, more quote unquote worse than Maryland. Maryland's supposed to be a little bit better, and they struggled against them. You know, can Michigan reaffirm, no, we're still the big dog. We are the Big Ten champs for a reason currently until we face Ohio State. But that to me is the big thing, is can Michigan prove against Penn State that they're still the team?
Sam?
I have said from day one when we started talking football back in, what was it, July, excuse me, that I think Michigan's going to have a down season compared to what they had last year. And they're going to lose some games that last year that team wouldn't have. And I think this is one of those games. I think Penn State comes in and they beat them. I really like their defense. And that's one thing that, you know, along with an offense that can produce some points. They struggled with Maryland, which Maryland's much better than what they have been in the past, but they struggled with them, and they struggled with IU. And that tells me that, you know what, they're susceptible, and this is the best team they've seen right now. I think Penn State goes in. I think they beat them in the Big House.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because if you're looking for some stats to maybe help believe what Sam is putting out there, this was tweeted out by College Football Nerds. Make sure we give credit to the College Football Nerds. Love College Football Nerds. So Michigan's played 6 games so far this year. 5 of the teams they've played against are 98th or worse in scoring offense. 4 of them are 121st or worse in college football when it comes to scoring. So, to your point, we have not seen Michigan play really a talented team to this point. I mean, Maryland was the best offense, and if Maryland hadn't spotted them 7 points to begin the game, and Tagovailoa doesn't get hurt in that game, you're starting to play a little bit of the what if already with Michigan here early in the season. For Penn State, though, like I said, they're coming off a game where they beat Northwestern 17-7. I know weather kind of impacted that a little bit, but Northwestern and what they look like this year, like that, just seeing that score kind of puts a halt on me. But I do think Penn State, to your point, has a great defense. I think they have an excellent secondary. And I think they're able to run the football, which has been missing maybe since the Barkley days there in Happy Valley. Nicholas Singleton seems to be the real deal. So I think there's something to it. And this is a big one. This is the first time these two teams meet unbeaten since 1997. It had been 25 years since we had a matchup like this.
I saw an interesting thing on ESPN this morning before I came into the office. Was there are 3 matchups of top 13 or higher teams. They're all undefeated against, and so these 3 undefeated matchups this late in the season, it's the first time since the mid-90s that it's happened.
Wow.
And I think what are the 3? It's Penn State, Michigan, Tennessee, Alabama, and Oklahoma State, and who are they playing? TCU.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So first time since the 90s. So, well, doesn't happen very often.
It's a good week of college football too. I mean, that's
Sure.
going to be a good reason to be in front of your TV.
Across the nation that's happening,
Yeah.
except for the West Coast.
Well,
Evidently nobody likes the West Coast.
let me do my best to Iowa and drag you both right back down to the Big Ten West while we're talking about undefeated football across the country.
Yeah.
Because we have a big one, Minnesota and Illinois from Champaign. The Gophers trying to keep the boat up and alive in the Big Ten West race. Illinois right now trying to just keep rolling. Off to a 5-1 start. Has the number 1 running back in the country, Chase Brown, there in the Illini uniforms. We'll start with you, Tony. What do you see between this one, Minnesota and Illinois?
I see a potentially very good game coming up out of this. I mean, these are 2 teams. I know I personally had a little bit more expected out of Minnesota. They've only had 1 loss. It was against a good Purdue team, and it wasn't like it was, a complete and total blowout. So this is still a very good Minnesota team that I have significantly more confidence in than I do in Illinois. Now, I know we talked about how, Brown is the, number 1 rusher in the country. As far as rushing yards per game, Minnesota actually has more yards rushing than Illinois does. They're 245 yards averaging a game against 195.
You are listening. Sorry.
Cut me off again.
Producer thing.
But Minnesota has more rushing yards.
Yeah, Minnesota has more rushing yards. And then defensively, this is actually 2 defenses that, kind of eerily, mirror each other. Minnesota allows 222 yards total per game. Illinois averages 228. They're within 20 yards difference as far as passing. Illinois allows a little bit more passing, but you can run a little bit against Minnesota. So I expect it to be a good thing. Again, I'm still not exactly sold on Tommy DeVito because he is not Danny DeVito. It's not the same. You cannot compare those 2.
I love that this is the campaign that's been drummed up by Tony. Go ahead, Sam.
Accounts differ greatly too, I'm sure.
That's true.
Yes.
All right, what do you think, Sam?
Is Mo back? Is he going to play? Have they decided? Have they announced it?
I haven't heard.
And I tell you what, and I'm not saying he is disappointing, but his career has been sort of disappointing in the aspect of he just keeps getting hurt. And because he is an amazing running back, I honestly, if he's healthy, I'm saying that I pretty much am set on Minnesota.
He's expected to play.
He is okay. So let's say that makes it a lot closer to me. Now I honestly, I really like Minnesota over Illinois if Mo's Mo. It's okay. I'm just going to take Minnesota for this. Because I'm still not sold on Illinois. If they beat Minnesota, I'll buy into Illinois more.
I was going to say, so if Illinois wins this game, are we saying Illinois Purdue for the division title? Just like everybody had it drawn up before the season?
Right. Yeah, because they're kind of the ones that are kind of, even though there's not much cream, it is rising towards the top of the division, I guess, sort of. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, that's the best answer I can give is, yeah, I guess.
I would say in the spirit of college football, if they win, This next coming week, yes. But again, it's college football. They could do this. Illinois could start out strong, and then they could lose like the next 3. And then I would be like, all right, and the West is back open again.
They did lose to IU. So let's not think that they're not susceptible to a team that's below them beating them, below the record that they are right now, below the 24th ranking in the polls. They are susceptible to getting beat by a team that isn't near as good.
Do we, real quick before we hit the halftime break, if we're looking at the Big Ten West, are we ready to still officially rule out the 2 programs that have interim coaches, Nebraska and Wisconsin? Do we give them any chance at all of winning this division?
I would say no on Nebraska. I'm still not sure on Wisconsin because they did dismantle Northwestern. Something Penn State couldn't do.
Yeah,
that's true. But I mean, I would say at that same token, I mean, you dismantled Northwestern. Like, it's
right. But that's my point on saying I honestly, had Paul Chryst not been fired, I still would consider them in the hunt because they're only 1 game out. I mean, there's still only 1 game out. Nebraska, I don't know that they've done enough to give me the warm fuzzies enough to say they're even going to finish 500, honestly.
14-13 win over Rutgers. That's not enough of a confidence injection for you?
Throw the confetti. You know what the kicker is they're tied for first in the division.
Yeah.
And I'm writing them
That's what
off.
I mean. That's what I mean. Like, this division is something else. So I was curious where we stand right now. So who are we officially ruling out? Like, so we have Northwestern out.
Done.
And we've written off Nebraska, which I'm still a little shaky on. Like, I don't know what to expect for the year.
To win the West.
I know. I've completely thrown logic out with this. No, yeah, correct. Yeah. No, I'm banking on a turnaround like I was after Frost was fired. But I really don't know what to expect. I'm not going to apply logic or sense at all to this division race. Really, I'm just going to kind of sit back and I'm going to be kind of like the Joker. Like when the hospitals are like exploding in the background and he's just kind of like walking like this. Like, I'm just like going to be a conscientious observer of what's happening in this division.
Can I add something real quick? The week after Scott Frost got fired, Nebraska got housed by Oklahoma. Oklahoma has yet to win a game since, and they've looked horrible doing it.
Yeah.
What's that say about Nebraska getting housed by them?
But we're pulling these hairs, which is fair, on every team in the division. Like, this is not a good division.
No. And honestly, to me, and this is, call me a homer or what you will, Purdue's probably got the least to knock, but they've still got really bad losses because they've beaten themselves. I'm hoping that they've remedied that because my pick will look good at the end of the season if they have. But like they have butchered themselves, and they've made a mess of the West as well. They could be sitting 7-0 or 6-0 with no worries. But Penn State and Syracuse happened.
Tony, is there anybody else we need to write off from the West, or are we good with Northwestern Nebraska for the time being?
I would say those 2 at the current moment, because again, about the time we do, if we try to apply logic to this, if we try to look at it from you could probably write, like the minute we decide to write off Iowa, they're gonna be like, we're still gonna be here.
Honestly, I'd write off Iowa before Wisconsin. I'd write Iowa off before I would Wisconsin.
Yeah, I would agree with that because, again, it's not like Wisconsin's devoid of the talent. And to be honest, I think we're all still a little bit confused as to why Paul Chryst even got fired to start with. So I wouldn't write off Wisconsin yet. I do think that it's possible. Obviously, they've been a big favorite the last few years to win the West, even with Paul Chryst. So I wouldn't write them off yet. Again, maybe with Iowa, but watch. The way the season has been so far and the way it is, Iowa might go undefeated for whatever reason. Might only be like by 1 point wins, but they might go undefeated. You never know.
So the Big Ten West, we have a 5-team race. The Big Ten East, we have a 1-team race.
Well, honestly,
I mean, really, is anybody believing Ohio State doesn't win the division?
Honestly, if you made me make a pick right now, I'd pick them to win the national title, honestly.
Right.
So I mean, like, no, I don't think they're losing anything. I really, and like we've said time and time again, if they lose this year, it's because they beat themselves. It's not going to be because the team beat or is better than them.
Yeah. So it'll be fun to watch these kind of go on, but for entertainment purposes, I'm kind of into the West. There's some intrigue.
Well,
there's some unknown.
It's like a car accident. You don't want to look, but you have to.
All right. Let's hit the halftime break. We come back. We have some basketball to get to.
Yes.
As the Big Ten Media Days took place in Minneapolis this week. We'll get to that next.
You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
Hi, I'm Lauren.
And I'm John.
And we host the Beard Owl Podcast, the podcast where we talk about two of the greatest things in the world, beer and Weird Al.
And a bunch of other stuff.
That's right. Do you like nostalgia? Do you like sibling banter? Do you like beer? Do you like Weird Al? Are you human?
If you answered yes to any of those questions, give us a listen. Become one of our loyal commenters.
Hey, you there. We've got a question for you. Are you tired of clickbait stories and the loudest voices driving discussions in culture and entertainment?
If so, I'm Dylan.
I'm Kendall.
And I'm Corey. And we host the podcast From the Middle. We're middle-class guys living in the middle of America, in the middle chapters of our lives with points of view somewhere in the middle.
We take a more reasonable and centrist approach in our discussions covering genres like comedy, culture, entertainment, and interviews, with really interesting folks like business owners, comic creators, doctors, news anchors, New York Times best-selling illustrators, professional stand-up comics, and more. We really value a relaxed and conversational podcast, one that we hope is so fun and laid back, you'll forget you're not actually hanging out with us.
So search at From the Mid Pod, just like it sounds, or check us out everywhere you can find podcasts.
Welcome back for the second half. And as we get into the third quarter, Sam right on cue with the whistle. As we get ready for the Big Ten basketball season, we're going to be talking a little bit about men's and women's Big Ten basketball here on the program throughout the year. But I think we should start off with what we've seen so far for the preseason media ballot, the official, unofficial ballot, which I thought I had right here in front of me, and apparently I don't. But nonetheless, what the unofficial official media ballot had was Indiana finishing first on the men's side, Illinois second, Michigan third, Michigan State fourth, Purdue fifth. Let's start there. Big agree or disagree? Sam, we'll start with you.
I honestly, my biggest concern would be where IU is of those five. We've been here recently, ever since, for even when Mike Davis took over, like they've had seasons where they've been expected to do great things and they've just underperformed and just under accomplished everything. So, excuse me, while I don't necessarily disagree that they're on paper the favorite, I don't know. I just don't know. I mean, IU's been number one in the country preseason in the past during this time frame, and they've just underperformed and ended up not being so good. So of those, it's a good order on paper. I don't argue with it on paper.
And I suppose before we get to Tony, we'll let Tony get settled. We're catching Tony at a bad time. That's more or less my fault for getting us started early with the recording, but we'll get to Tony once he settles in. But my question to you, Sam, would be, I understand the objection or concern or questions around Indiana being number one, but who else would you put at number one at this point? And I think that's really what we're getting to.
Honestly, I would put probably Illinois at the top comparatively if I were to put somebody in order.
Let me start kind of fogging up and dirtying up the waters with Illinois, because Illinois you're looking at a team that lost so much from last year. There's no Kofi Coburn. Coburn's gone. Curbello's gone. Plummer's gone. Like so many big pieces. Trent Frazier gone. And what they did, they bring back some of the talented freshmen of RJ Melendez. I like a lot. Luke Goody, I like a lot. I like a lot of those pieces. And then they bring in, those are both wings, by the way, 2 wings. And then they bring in Terrence Shannon Jr. from Texas Tech, another wing. Matthew Mayer from Baylor, another wing. And I think they might even have another wing on top of that. I'm taking a look here.
In other words, they're going small.
I mean, they are just going to wing you to death. And I don't know how that works. Like, there are questions at guard. There are questions in the front court. Like, they just have wings. And I like the pieces. I just don't know how they fit.
Right. And is it possible that Brad Underwood's changing his style more, getting away from the big man and maybe trying to go up tempo and just try something?
Sure. But if different. You do, usually guards would help there. Like, yeah, I don't understand what you just do with, like, you have all these wings and, like, you're going to be counting on a freshman really to be guard, which, and again, I like the recruits. I just don't know how these pieces match together. And I don't think Brad Underwood knows how the pieces match together. He talked about that at the media day. He's like, we got a lot of different things we could do, but until we roll it out there, I'm not really sure how. Like it all comes together. So that's my question with Illinois.
Well, and I guess that this is a testament of what the Big Ten might be this year, because I don't disagree with IU being the front runner necessarily, but I question what they're actually going to perform to. So I guess maybe it's just what the Big Ten is going to be, to me anyways, this year is just going to be a big coin flip, because you don't know what IU is going to do. You don't know how Illinois is going to turn out. Is Michigan better with Dickinson? You know, is he going to be the player of the year? And Michigan steps up. Is Purdue, with what they've got coming in, is Michigan State? I mean, it's such a coin flip. I mean, the conference front runner is the top ranked team in the AP poll, and they're 14th.
Right.
So I think it's just what the Big Ten is going to be this year.
No, and I think you're right. And by the way, you brought up Hunter Dickinson. That's who the media official poll made as their player of the year. I think we got Tony in a better.
I think that's a right pick too.
Tony, we got you in a better spot now. Indiana or Illinois? What are you seeing at the top of the Big Ten before we tip off?
I kind of agree with what Sam said. It's one of those. There's so many question marks because of who's gone, who's coming in, new players. Will they click in systems or not? It's one of those, to me. It's so up in the air. Like right now, Indiana can be the front runner, but it's like, there's nobody else that I would say is more of a clear favorite to take that. All of those teams very easily. We could throw those names in a paper bag, shuffle them up, dump them out, and whoever comes out first, like, okay, let's say it's Purdue. And be like, okay, well, maybe it will be Purdue, and we could be completely wrong. This, like Sam said, this is one of those. It's such a coin flip. It's so up in the air. Right now, I would say, sure, I kind of agree with the polls. I don't know how much of that I would switch. So, yeah, I think I would keep them. I would keep them there just purely based off of last year's kind of miracle run that they did in the Big Ten tournament of, beating people they weren't supposed to beat. Keep them the number one, but that's not one of those I wouldn't lock that in as a clear-cut favorite for me personally.
Let's think about something too. I'm sorry to cut you off there. Let's think about something too. There was no mention of Iowa. What if Chris Murray goes off like Keegan did? Yeah. Then all of a sudden they're a front runner, or they're in that mix. Like that's how much of a coin flip and unknown that the Big Ten knows. This is the most. I mean, there've been wide open seasons in my lifetime with the Big Ten, but this one just is so wide open.
Yeah. And let's not forget too. Sam and I talked about this. Look at how much difficulty both Maryland and Rutgers gave people last year. Was it Rutgers beat like 5 top top 10
ranked
teams.
ranked teams with like 4 in a row, I think it was.
Yeah.
Wasn't it, Dalton, or at least 3, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, Rutgers
And they're
could
not
be
going to
one
be
of those
horrible
teams.
this year.
No, I like Rutgers. I don't think we're talking enough about Rutgers.
Yeah.
Who's the other team you mentioned? Maryland?
Maryland did really well. I mean, I watched them against a lot of the Michigan State games against Michigan. They were losses, but I mean, it wasn't like it wasn't close. This was a team that gave everybody fits last year.
They were the Nebraska of men's basketball last year.
Yes, they were.
Well, and kind of literally. I mean, Mark Turgeon was fired in the middle of the season or dismissed in the middle of the season.
Right.
And so now they have Kevin Willard there as the new head coach. Of course, he was with Seton Hall years prior. And I think he did a nice job of retaining as much of the roster as possible in his landing at College Park. I mean, he's got Dante Scott back. So he's done some nice things to keep some of the Terps around. But if we want to talk Rutgers for a minute,
yeah.
Look, I don't think Rutgers in any world wins the Big Ten this year, but I think this is a top 5 Big Ten team. I think between Cliff Omoruyi, I think they bring back Defensive Player of the Year Caleb McConnell. They bring back Paul Mulcahy at guard. Like, this is going to be a gritty team that is just going to frustrate so many Big Ten teams this season. I'm high on the Scarlet Knights.
Are you saying they're going to make it to the tournament, not have to play into the regular tournament this year?
Yeah, no, I think they're in. I would be kind of surprised if not. Now, I also imagine this is a year where the Big Ten doesn't get 9 teams in like in years past, because much of what we've talked about, it's so unknown. It's maybe not as elite as years past. But I like Rutgers a lot. While we talk about some of the different pieces and how they fit, Purdue, because again, for some of our listeners that aren't quite sure, Sam is a big Purdue fan, has a pretty big Purdue interest. They got a couple 7-footers, shocker. But you have Zach Edey back, and Zach Edey's ready to just kind of terrorize the league. But then William Berg comes in from Sweden at 7'2". A lot of question about what happens with maybe Purdue's backcourt heading into the season. But where are we at on the Boilers? The unofficial official media poll had them 5.
Coin flip it, and sure, that's perfect. Like, it's not going to be the season that it was last year. And now watch, I say that, and that has literally happened to me. Like, I sit here and think, well, that's not much of a season, and then they go and push for the Big Ten. Definitely would be welcomed, but I'm not anticipating it. I'll just be along for the ride and going, yay! Because honestly, when you lose that much like they did, I mean, they lost Stefanovic, Ivy, and Williams. Like, all 3 of those being gone, that's a major portion of their offense, their rebounding, and just their leadership. Now, that's not to say they don't have leadership still, because they've got Gillis, they've got Martin, they've got First, like Edey, like they've got a lot coming back. It's just not the marquee players that they had that are coming back. So I would say right now, looking at it, I would say 5's just a perfect spot for them right now.
Okay. Tony, any arguments with Purdue at 5?
No, not really. Like Sam said, they lost a lot. They do kind of have some new guys coming in, so it wouldn't surprise me. But yeah, it's like I said, a majority of the Big Ten right now is just a big coin flip. So yeah, I would kind of agree. Maybe keep them at 5, because to me, Michigan. I know we talked about how Dickinson is coming back and he's going to be a big impact player for them. But again, what can the rest of the Michigan team do? And honestly, Juwan Howard, what's he going to be like? Coaching again this year, because I mean, he got suspended at the end of the season for fighting Wisconsin's coach. So can he keep it together?
First matchup,
right? Can he keep it together for the entirety of the season?
I would go on the record and bet against it, because 2 straight years he's had incidences where he's lost his cool and he's either had to be restrained or he's struck somebody. So I would honestly, if I was a betting person, I would say he's going to have another run in with a coach.
If we look at Michigan real quick, they do bring back Hunter Dickinson, but they lose Eli Brooks, Devontae Jones, Caleb Houston, Musa Diabate. That's 4 of the top 5 leading scorers from last year's squad. And for the 3rd year in a row, Michigan's taking the transfer approach at point guard. 2 years ago with Mike Smith, it worked where they won the Big Ten title. Last year, it's not fully on Devontae Jones, but the project didn't work as well as it did 2 years ago. This year, they're bringing in Jalen Llewellyn. Yeah, Llewellyn from Princeton, who averaged about 16 points a game there with the Tigers. So we'll see how that kind of works. But honestly, and not just because I have an affiliated interest with such program, but Michigan State is the one that I keep looking at, and I want to know more. Like, I'm really intrigued by what there is with the Spartans this year. They don't bring in any transfer scholarship players. They just bring back the same roster they had last year and add in a couple of recruits. But you're looking at maybe one of the best backcourts in the country between A.J. Hoggard, Tyson Walker. Jaden Akins looks like he's ready to explode for a breakout year if he gets back to being healthy. He just had surgery a couple weeks ago. And then you bring back Malik Hall. Joey Hauser's back. And then you throw in a couple other pieces with Madi Sissoko, Jackson Kohler, the freshman, Trey Holloman, the freshman. It's an undersized team, but it's a team that I think is really fast and could take up a different identity than what many Big Ten teams do. Like, there are pieces there, and if it clicks just right, I'm fascinated by what Michigan State could be.
Is it possible that they got their on paper official ranking based specifically on the fact they haven't had any major additions through the portal or anything, and they're going off what happened last year?
Oh, 100%.
So they're not anticipating them being better necessarily. They have the same roster. There's going to be some progression. Okay, let's give them 4th.
Yeah.
I
would agree.
The one thing that people, and I'm the shocker, Dalton, this is my Tom Izzo worship spot, because you cannot take him for granted. He is the wild card in the aspect of, if he's got the right players in place, he's going to motivate them at the right time to be successful, like he has so many other times. I wouldn't disagree, but like I would sit there and think, well, they did their ranking completely on what they did last year, because there's nothing really new to the roster.
And I think, honestly, that's what a lot of people, like we talked about, like with Illinois, like people don't really know what to expect, how that's going to work.
So they're kind of giving them their ranking because based off of last year.
Yeah, well, and I mean, that's why when we talked at the top, Indiana's number 1, because they have the most that you know of and the most that you can count on. Like, everything else is kind of guesswork across the board for all the programs. And for Michigan State, you had a 7-footer in Marcus Bingham Jr. last year. Mm-hmm. He played rather inconsistent at times, but you had a big. Now you don't really have a big quite like that. So Michigan State's going to have to play differently. But again, if you're leaning on what's your strength, which is the backcourt play, and A.J. Hoggard might just end up being one of the best point guards in the country this year. He has that kind of potential. If that's put to use, like, MSU could be a real instigator. I don't even know what you want to call it. Maybe just contender.
Fly in the ointment.
Like, that's the one that's fascinating to me. And again, not just because of the interest, but because that team, Michigan State, playing small. I mean, the staple's always been defend, rebound, run. Seeing them rebound with a bunch of guards is going to be interesting this year, but I think they're going to run everybody out of the gym. Like, I think it's going to be a fast break team, up-tempo team. I'm interested in that. Real quick, before we get to the fourth quarter, let's switch over to women's basketball for the moment. Yeah. We have not the unofficial official poll. We have the actual official poll for the Big Ten. So look at this.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Do I need a breaking news audio? Dun,
you're right.
Dun, dun, dun.
And I should mention, so the unofficial official poll we talked about for the men's group, that's a bunch of media people that got together and just kind of made one themselves. They all vote and put it together themselves. This, on the women's side, is actually orchestrated by the Big Ten Conference. So this is the official poll. That's the distinction.
Okay, fair enough.
Anyways, the preseason rankings heading into the women's basketball year: number 5, Michigan; 4, Maryland; 3, Indiana; 2 Ohio State, 1 Iowa. The Iowa Hawkeyes, who have the same starting 5 for the 3rd straight year, led by Caitlin Clark, the Steph Curry of women's
she
basketball.
Steps into the gym, she's in range.
Yep.
Correct. Like they're expected to win it again. They won the regular season and tournament titles last year. They shared the regular season crown with Ohio State, who again is higher up on this list. But you look in this point in the season, or before we even get to the season, I don't understand like how you couldn't put Iowa number 1. So I think this is the right job done here with the voting early on.
I'm still getting to know the women's basketball side, so I'm not as well versed as you, Dalton. But I if there's anything I do know, like without a doubt, is the past 2 years Iowa has been the top dog, and they're returning the same starting 5 as 3 year for the 3rd straight year. Why wouldn't they whoever voted, if anybody voted against them not being a number 1, they should have their voting revoked. Iowa's really, really good.
I did vote for them number 1, so I'm glad to be.
Good for you. You get to keep your voting
powers.
And I should mention that was the coaches poll. For the media poll, they have it 1 Iowa, 2 Indiana, 3 Ohio State, 4 Maryland, 5 Nebraska. So a little bit of a shakeup
so
there.
It sounds to me like the 2 through 5 are very fluid, but number 1's pretty solid then.
Well, and 2 and 3 both were Indiana, Ohio State, just different spots between the two.
But like it's debatable on where they're at. Like nobody's debating where Iowa is.
And maybe one of the interesting ones really is Maryland. A lot of people are trying to decide what to do with the Terps because we talk about in the day and age of transfer portal and everything else. Maryland had a star player last year in Angel Reese, brother Julian's on the men's basketball team. But Angel Reese averaged 18 points a game, 11 rebounds a night for the Terps. She transferred out. She went to LSU. And so now the Terps actually lost, 5 of their top 6 scorers from a season ago. They bring back Diamond Miller, who's expected to be a pretty big piece and a great player this year. But they add in a couple of transfers, one being Lavender Briggs from Florida, who averaged 17 points a game for the Gators. Brianne Alexander from Vanderbilt averaged about 16 points a game. Allie Kubek from Towson averaged about 15 points a game. So they're trying to make up with it with some transfers because they lost so many pieces. Abby Myers from Princeton, who is the Ivy League Player of the Year. A lot of people just don't really know what to do in College Park yet because it's so much new. Much like we were talking about on the men's basketball side, it's so hard to grade on the things you don't know. And again, we see Iowa. They just won a regular season in a tournament, and they bring back the same starting 5. We're like, check. Right. I mean, that's just how we work, and that makes total sense to do. That's the logical thing to do, but we don't know what to make of this Maryland team yet.
Well, it sounds to me that it's other than the front runner, the Big Ten on the women's side is just as much of a coin flip as what it is in the men's side, with the exception of we all know that IU and Ohio State are the number 2 and 3 team. We just don't know what order, but the rest of it's just kind of
yeah. Well, and I mean, much like you were talking about Tom Izzo being the wild card, and you always kind of believe in him. Brenda Fries has a lot of that with the Maryland women's program too. So a lot of people are like, okay, they got transfer pieces. We're going to trust they figure that out, and maybe they figure it out to be even better than what we have.
And maybe she's getting that confidence vote for the team because of what she is able to do. So it's one of those that, okay, we know she's really, really, like if this were Tom Izzo replacing 6 of his top 7 scorers with a bunch of transfers that are pretty good transfers, he'd probably get some more votes for higher finishing because he's Tom Izzo. So it's kind of the same thing.
Real quick here before we get to our headlines, looking at the preseason teams, I'll read the coaches team. They have Grace Berger and Mackenzie Holmes from Indiana, Caitlin Clark, obviously of Iowa. Caitlin Clark is Player of the Year preseason for the Big Ten. Also, Monica, her big man teammate there in Iowa City. Diamond Miller from Maryland, Leah Brown from Michigan, Alexis Markowski from Nebraska, Taylor Mikesell from Ohio State, JC Sheldon from Ohio State, and McKenna Marissa from Penn State. That's the All Big Ten media group, coaches group. Real quick, just getting back to the men's side so we can get a couple more of those in. We mentioned a player of the year, Hunter Dickinson from Michigan, and this is the unofficial media ballot poll. Freshman of the year, Jalen Hood-Schifino, who's with Indiana. Transfer of the year, Terrence Shannon Jr., and the All Big Ten first team as selected by the media, Hunter Dickinson, Trace Jackson Davis, Zach Edey, Chris Murray, and Clifford Omoruyi.
I can't argue with any of those. I really can't. Well, the first all Big Ten team and your player of the year. I mean, the other ones that you mentioned, I'm gonna say, yeah, okay, I agree. I guess I'm not as fluid on that, but like, yeah, that seems like a really good all Big Ten team. And Dickinson, in my thought, is the player. He's the best player in the conference at this point.
Yeah,
like that could change. I mean, Johnny Davis came out of nowhere ish last year to take it. So, I mean, it's possible that could, I mean, Chris Murray, he could be the player of the year, very easily could be player of the year if he produces like he is thought he could.
I remember talking with Fran McCaffrey last year, and he said, you just wait. Chris is going to come on just like Keegan did. He's just a little later to the party. His development's just a little bit later, but he's going to come on. So it's going to, and Fran said during the media days, this is a first round draft pick when talking about Chris Murray. So expecting a big year there in Iowa City, but we'll do a lot of Big Ten basketball throughout the year. For now, we're going to head over to the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter, four fingers up. Yeah, like the football.
I had my hand up. It was just off the screen.
I know. That's what, I started looking, and I saw only three fingers were there, and I had to keep putting it right in front of my face. Anyway, Tony Hollinsworth with the Tony Tribune. What is our headline?
Yeah, so in case anybody missed it this past week, you had Michigan versus Indiana. It was a good game. It was a very close game. There was a big scare there that actually stopped the game. Michigan running backs coach Mike Hart actually collapsed in about the second quarter just on the ground. It was a pretty scary time. There's a lot of confusion as to what was happening. He did actually put out that progress is trending upwards. They tweeted out that he's actually doing a lot better. He did, not to brag about my home state a little bit, but Indiana has some of the best medical care, especially IU. They have kind of a monopoly on the healthcare industry here in Indiana. So he got treated very quickly. He's on the up and up. So Mike Hart is doing a lot better today and this morning than what we saw Saturday afternoon, unfortunately. So he's up and going, and it's still pretty cool about how everybody came together for him, took care of him and made sure that he was good to go.
Awesome. And it is a great update. That was a scary, scary sighting. It was one where everybody kind of held their breath. So it's a great update and a great headline there, Tony. Let's move over to Sam Sprunger and the Sam Sentinel.
Oh, goodness, kids. Let's talk historically bad offenses, okay?
Iowa.
We're going to Iowa. I've ever since the whole South Dakota State only produced 7 points, field goal, 2 safeties.
The Iowa way.
Yeah, the Iowa way. The defense outscored both offenses that day. That we made light of that at that point, but then it's only gotten worse with a couple of semi bright spots, and not even that bright of a bright spot because we hung 27 on Nevada. Yeah, and there's a team that I forget what it's not Sacred Heart, but Immaculate something or other like that. Scored 40 plus. They actually scored 51 on Nevada and beat them. So hanging 27 on Nevada is not a big deal. But I saw a tweet. It's from Shahan Jaraha. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. What'd you say?
Bless you.
Oh yeah, thank you. So he tweeted this out during the game against Illinois. He says, "So if I understand this right, Iowa just punted from their own 16, recovered a muffed punt at the Illinois 35, went 3 plays for -6 yards and punted, forced a fumble and recovered at the 5, went 4 plays, -4 yards, kicked a field goal. All in all, a 15-play, -10, 7 and 10-yard, 76-yard field goal or punt, 76 punt yard field goal drive. That is the only way Iowa scored half of their points. That is the way they scored half of their points against Illinois. They went -10 yards in 2 separate drives on the same chain of events that led to a field goal for them. That is atrocious. Kurt Ferentz has got some things he needs to think about, and God love him. He loves his son. I totally agree. But at some point, you've kind of got to go, okay, it's either me or the offensive coordinator that probably should be changed. And unless Kurt's ready to retire, it's going to be the OC. It has to be, I think. It's not looking any better either. They've got some offenses that they're going to play against, or some defenses they're going to play against that are going to make them look bad even worse, more. I don't see an end to this season of atrocious offensive output for the Hawkeyes. I don't see them crawling much further than above Northwestern in the West. And it's not at all what I expected from Iowa. And that's the Sam Sentinel.
Once again, I offer up and suggest, if you just put on a different pair of glasses, Sam, the Iowa offense, instead of atrocious, turns into just a work of art. And this is, again, my PSA to follow at Sickos Committee on Twitter, because they paint the art that is the Iowa bad offense in such a beautiful way. So that's my PSA.
It is amazing, though, just how each week they come up with a different way to look horrible. Like they do. That chain of events is a real thing. Like that's a legit thing. It started at the 16. They punted, recovered a muffed fumble on that punt, couldn't do anything with it, and had to punt again and got a fumble, and then scored 3 points because they went backwards.
Yeah. I hear you say, Sam, you have to give them credit. That offense is great at being bad. Like they do it like nobody else.
Offense I've ever seen. This is the worst offense I've ever seen in my life. I mean, and I've seen Purdue. I mean, growing up, I saw Purdue look horrible, but it wasn't this bad. I've never seen an offense be this bad.
Again, just change the frame, change the prescription, and it turns into beauty.
No, here's the thing. I can laugh at it. I absolutely and I don't think it's me making fun necessarily, but it's one of those that you can laugh at the horrible wowness of it.
Correct.
But still just be like, good Lord, something needs to change.
That's where I am. All right. With the Dalton Daily, I saw this tweeted out by CBS Sports, and it really kind of struck a chord with me, and not a good or bad way. It just really stood out to me. Nebraska, they really do care about their football there at Nebraska. I mean, the fans are relentless. They all went to Dublin, Ireland for the game against Northwestern because they just care that much. The radio broadcasts are like 24 hours long for a football game in Nebraska because they all care that much, and there's not much else to. What'd you say?
It's the only thing they got.
I know. Well, and they care. I mean, they really, truly care. They have a sellout streak. That's one of the greater traditions in college football currently. And it goes back to 1962. It's a 60-year-long streak that Nebraska has sold out every game there in Lincoln. And with 3 home games left to go, there were still a few hundred tickets available for each of those 3 games. And the streak was a little bit in danger. That's until one fan stepped up to the plate and spent $21,000 on the remaining tickets to keep the sellout streak alive. This, yet again, shows how much Nebraska fans care, how much they're willing to put into things like this to keep the allure, the tradition of Nebraska football alive. I think it's a really, really cool thing, kind of putting the money where the mouth is for a Nebraska fan base and stepping up to the plate like that. I don't know if he has any plans, what he's going to do with the few hundred tickets each game, but find some people that normally don't get to go to those Nebraska games, even if it is a down year. Find ways to get those tickets to some kids in communities, you go into high schools, whatever. Find something that you can do really good with that. But I love the idea of holding this tradition to such a prestigious level that you dump out $21,000 to keep it alive.
Well, and if you can afford it, absolutely. That is.
Yeah.
And you know what? There are kids that couldn't dream of going to a Nebraska game right now. And you're right. If they could get it would revitalize that love and keep those roots growing deep, because those kids get to go see them. Yeah, like you said, doesn't matter if it's a down year or not. It'll still allow them that chance to go see the team that they love while they're growing up.
Yep.
All right. So that'll do it for another edition of Big Ten Plus 4. On the way out, Sam, Tony, hit us with the socials. Where can everybody be finding us on social media and find our show?
Yeah, we've got at Big Ten Plus 4, spell out plus, gentlemen, spell out the plus, not the plus sign, at Big Ten Plus 4 for Twitter, for Instagram, and for the TikToks. And then go to Facebook. It is Facebook, or is Big Ten Plus 4. Find us on oddpodsmedia.com along with all the other Odd Pods Media family shows. And every week on ASAP Network, we get to stream live there. Fantastic. Thank you, ASAP. Thank you, Odd Pods. And there you go.
Awesome. All right. So for Sam Sprugger, Tony Hollinsworth, I'm Dalton Shetler. Thank you all for tuning in for another week. Until next time, see you.
See you later.
Peace.